The Discovery. The cargo bay of the research vessel Horizon stretched into shadow, illuminated only by emergency lighting strips that cast everything in shades of amber and rust. Dr. Marcus Reed moved between the storage containers with practiced efficiency, his tablet recording inventory numbers that would satisfy the quarterly audit. 6 months into deep space rotation had taught him that routine was survival. Everything had its place. Everything had its purpose. When the motion sensor chirped, he almost dismissed it as another malfunction. The ship's systems were old, prone to ghost readings, but then he heard it, a sound too deliberate to be mechanical, too careful to be accidental. His hand moved to the comm device on his belt, then stopped. Between two massive cargo containers marked with biohazard warnings, he found her. She was small, impossibly small for something that radiated such presence. Her skin was the color of deep purple twilight, darker around her joints and fingers, lighter across her face and throat. The hue shifted subtly with each breath she took, like watching storm clouds move across a sunset. She wore something that might have been clothing once, now torn and stained with substances he didn't recognize. Her eyes met his, large and dark, filled with an intelligence that transcended language, and fear, so much fear that it made his chest tighten. "Hey," he started to say, keeping his voice low and gentle, "I'm not going to." Her hand shot up faster than he could track, small fingers, delicate but strong, pressed against his lips. The touch was warm, her skin smooth despite the trembling he could feel running through her. She shook her head slowly, urgently. Her other hand came up in a gesture that needed no translation: silence. Marcus nodded, his heart hammered against his ribs as he carefully took her wrist, not pulling her hand away but acknowledging her command. She allowed the contact, her enormous eyes searching his face for something: trust, perhaps, or at least the absence of immediate threat. That's when the station-wide alert blared to life. Unauthorized biological signature detected, Sector 7, all personnel maintain current positions, security sweep in progress. The girl's entire body went rigid, her purple skin darkened several shades, and Marcus watched in fascination as the color drained from her face, leaving her an almost ghostly lavender. She was changing, he realized, camouflaging, trying to blend with the shadows. His training said to activate his comm, to report the finding, to let security handle whatever this was. His instinct, something deeper and more primal, said to protect her. Marcus made his choice in the space between heartbeats. He grabbed her hand properly this time, feeling how small it was in his palm, and pulled her deeper into the cargo bay. She came without resistance, moving with a grace that seemed impossible given her obvious terror. Her feet made no sound on the metal grating. Behind them, he could hear the whir of security drones entering the bay, their scanning lasers painting the walls in sweeping red lines. "This way," he whispered, guiding her toward a maintenance shaft he'd used countless times during equipment repairs. She understood immediately, following his lead as he pried open the panel. The shaft was narrow, dark. The girl slipped inside without hesitation. Marcus followed, pulling the panel closed just as the first drone swept past their location. In the cramped darkness, they were pressed close together. Marcus could feel her breathing, rapid and shallow, could feel the warmth radiating from her purple skin. Her hand found his in the dark and squeezed, not frantically, but with intention, gratitude, maybe, or a plea to keep choosing her over protocol. The drones passed, their mechanical humming fading into the distance. Marcus didn't move, didn't dare breathe too loudly. The girl remained perfectly still against him, her fingers slowly relaxing their grip but not letting go. In the silence, he became aware of her heartbeat, faster than human, but steady, strong. When he was certain the immediate danger had passed, he whispered, "My quarters, they won't search personal spaces without cause." She nodded against his shoulder. He felt it more than saw it. They moved through the maintenance tunnels like ghosts, Marcus leading the way through passages he'd mapped during long, boring shifts. The girl followed, her hand never leaving his. When they finally reached the access point near his quarters, he checked the corridor through the grating. Empty. They emerged into the hallway, and Marcus walked with forced casualness to his door. The girl stayed close, her head down, her purple skin now so pale it almost matched the ship's walls. The door slid open, they stepped inside, privacy protocols activated. Only then did she release his hand. The girl moved to the center of his small quarters and seemed to collapse inward, not physically, but emotionally, her skin darkened back to that rich purple, and she wrapped her arms around herself, finally allowing the terror to show. Marcus approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "You're safe here," he said softly, knowing she might not understand the words but hoping she'd understand the tone. She looked up at him, those impossibly dark eyes swimming with something that might have been tears. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and took both his hands in hers, bringing them to her chest. He could feel her heartbeat racing beneath his palms. She held his gaze and slowly, deliberately, the fear in her expression shifted to something else, something that looked almost like hope. Building trust. Marcus watched as the girl explored his quarters with cautious curiosity. Her purple fingers traced the edges of his desk, his books, the small collection of earth plants he'd managed to keep alive in the ship's artificial environment. Each touch was gentle, reverent almost, as if she were learning about him through his possessions. He pulled out his tablet and opened a blank drawing application, then sat on the floor, patting the space beside him. She understood immediately, settling down with her legs tucked beneath her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Marcus drew a simple stick figure, then pointed at himself. "Marcus," he said clearly. Her eyes lit up with understanding. She took the tablet from him, her movements careful, and began to draw, but what emerged wasn't a stick figure, it was something fluid and beautiful, symbols that seemed to dance across the screen. When she finished, she pointed to herself and then to the symbols. He tried to pronounce what he saw, mangling it completely. She tilted her head, and he could have sworn she smiled. Then she drew something simpler, for symbols that his mind could almost grasp. "Nira," he attempted. Her whole face brightened, the purple of her skin shifted to a lighter, warmer shade, almost violet. She nodded enthusiastically and placed her hand over his heart, then over her own. The gesture needed no translation. Over the next hours, they developed their own language. Nira drew pictures, detailed and expressive. She showed him images of men in dark suits, their faces hidden behind helmets, carrying weapons that looked more like medical instruments than guns. She drew her people, beings like herself with purple skin in various shades, being taken, being held in containers that glowed with cold blue light. When she drew what they did to her people, extracting something from their bodies while they were still conscious, Marcus felt rage building in his chest. "The collectors," he said, recognizing the corporate logo she'd sketched. "I've heard rumors, never thought." He stopped himself, clenching his fists. Nira reached out and took his hand, uncurling his fingers one by one. Her touch was soothing, intentional. She brought his hand to her face, letting him feel the warmth of her skin, the subtle texture that was like silk over something stronger. Then she guided his fingers down her arm, and he felt her heartbeat through her wrist, steady now, trusting. "I won't let them take you," Marcus promised, knowing the words meant nothing to her but hoping his tone conveyed everything. She seemed to understand. She moved closer, eliminating the small gap between them, and rested her head against his shoulder. It was such a human gesture that it caught him off guard. The warmth of her purple skin seeped through his shirt, and he became acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. Marcus wrapped his arm around her, and Nira's skin responded. The purple deepened to something rich and beautiful, like royal velvet. He felt her relax against him, her breathing slowing, synchronizing with his own. They stayed like that for a long time, communication without words, understanding without language. Eventually, Nira pulled back just enough to look at him. Her dark eyes studied his face with an intensity that made his breath catch. Then she did something that changed everything between them. She took his hand and placed it over her heart again, but this time she held it there, letting him feel the rhythm. Then she placed her hand over his heart, her fingers splayed across his chest, and her skin began to glow softly, a gentle luminescence that pulsed in time with both their heartbeats. Marcus understood. This was intimacy for her people, this sharing of rhythms, of warmth, of presence. It was more profound than any kiss, more meaningful than any words. "I see you," he whispered, not sure where the phrase came from. Nira's eyes widened, and her skin flared brighter for just a moment. Then she leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. The glow intensified where their skin touched, and Marcus felt something he'd never experienced before, a connection that seemed to bypass his brain entirely and speak directly to something deeper. Hours passed in comfortable silence. Nira showed him more through drawings, her home world, caverns filled with crystalline formations that grew from living rock, her family, smaller versions of herself with the same purple skin, the same expressive eyes. She drew herself as a child, learning to dim her glow, to hide. Marcus shared his own story through pictures and gestures: Earth, his family, the reasons he'd come to space, the loneliness of deep space exploration, the way he'd thrown himself into work to avoid feeling anything at all. When exhaustion finally claimed them, Nira curled against his side on the narrow bed, her head rested on his chest, one hand still pressed over his heart. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, protective and possessive in equal measure. As she drifted toward sleep, her skin began to cycle through shades of purple, from deep violet to soft lavender and back again. It was mesmerizing. Marcus realized this was her dreaming, her subconscious expressing itself through color. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, feeling the warmth of her against his lips. She stirred slightly, her hand tightening its grip on his shirt, then settling back into sleep. In the darkness of his quarters, with this alien girl in his arms, Marcus understood that everything had changed. He'd spent 6 months in space feeling nothing, and now, in less than a day, he felt everything. The ship's night cycle continued around them, oblivious to the revolution happening in one small room, where a xenobiologist and a hunted alien girl had found something neither had been looking for. Understanding, connection, the beginning of something that transcended species and protocol and every rule that said this was impossible. Marcus listened to Nira's breathing, felt the steady pulse of her heart against his side, and knew with absolute certainty that he would do anything to protect this, to protect her. Even if it meant becoming a fugitive himself. The growing threat. Morning shift began with an announcement that made Marcus's blood run cold. All personnel, this is Captain Williams. We have guests aboard the Horizon. Representatives from Xenotech Acquisitions will be conducting a routine inspection of our biological research facilities. Extend full cooperation. Nira sat up instantly, her purple skin draining to pale lavender. She'd been tracing patterns on Marcus's arm, a morning ritual they'd developed over the past 3 days, but now her fingers dug into his skin with fear. Marcus pulled up the security feed on his tablet. His clearance gave him access to most systems, and what he saw confirmed his worst suspicions. 3 figures in sleek black environmental suits were boarding through the main airlock. Their equipment was far too sophisticated for a routine inspection. Collectors, he breathed. Nira grabbed his tablet and began drawing frantically. She sketched the suits, the scanning devices they carried, the way they moved. Everything matched what she'd shown him before. Then she drew something new, a handheld device that emitted waves, and purple-skinned figures collapsing when those waves touched them. A frequency weapon, Marcus translated, specific to your biology. She nodded, her eyes wide and pleading. Marcus's mind raced through options. His quarters would be searched eventually. The collectors wouldn't need permission, not if Captain Williams had already made a deal. He pulled up the ship schematics, looking for somewhere, anywhere that scanners couldn't reach. The cryostorage facility, he said, pointing at the screen. It's shielded for radiation protection. Their scanners won't penetrate the walls. But, he hesitated, meeting Nira's frightened gaze. You'll have to stay in one of the maintenance crawlspaces. It'll be cold, cramped. She placed her hand over his mouth gently, the same gesture from their first meeting. Then she took his hand and pressed it to her heart, telling him without words that she trusted him, that discomfort was nothing compared to what the collectors would do. They moved quickly. Marcus disguised their journey through the ship as routine equipment checks. Nira stayed close, her skin now so pale it was almost white, blending with the ship's walls. Her hand never left his, fingers intertwined with his as if letting go would break whatever invisible tether kept her safe. The cryostorage facility was located in Sector 4, far from the guest quarters where the collectors were being housed. Marcus used his access codes to enter the service tunnels. The temperature dropped immediately, their breath forming clouds in the recycled air. Here, he said, opening a panel that led to a crawlspace above the main storage units. I'll bring you food, water, blankets. Nira pulled him close instead of climbing in, her arms wrapped around his waist, her face pressed against his chest. Marcus held her tightly, feeling the tremor running through her body. It wasn't just fear, he realized, it was grief, the grief of being hunted, of losing everything, of existing in constant terror. Hey, he whispered, tilting her chin up to look at him, I'm going to fix this, I promise. She stared at him for a long moment, those dark eyes searching his face. Then she rose up on her toes and pressed her forehead to his. The intimate gesture he'd learned was sacred to her people. Her skin began to glow where they touched, purple light blooming in the cold darkness. Marcus felt it again, that connection that bypassed language and logic. He could feel her emotions as if they were his own, fear, yes, but also something else, something warm and fierce and entirely unexpected. She pulled back just enough to place both hands on his face. Her thumbs traced his cheekbones, his jaw, memorizing him through touch. Then she did something that stopped his heart. She leaned in and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, exploratory. Her lips were warmer than human, softer, and they tasted like something sweet and foreign. Marcus responded instinctively, his hands sliding into her hair, pulling her closer. The purple glow of her skin intensified, spreading down her neck, her shoulders, bathing them both in violet light. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nira's skin was cycling through shades rapidly, deep purple to bright violet to something almost pink, her emotions written in color across her body. "I need you to know," Marcus said, even though she couldn't understand the words, "this isn't just about protecting you anymore. He stopped, struggling to articulate feelings that had developed too fast, too intensely. "I care about you, more than I should, more than makes sense." Nira smiled, really smiled, and pressed her hand over his heart again. Then she took his hand and placed it over hers. Their hearts beat in sync, a rhythm they'd somehow learned together. A sound in the corridor made them both freeze, footsteps, multiple sets, and voices. Marcus quickly helped Nira into the crawlspace, handing her the supplies he'd stashed earlier. She settled in, her eyes never leaving his face. "I'll come back," he promised, "every chance I get." She reached through the opening and caught his hand one more time, squeezing it. Then she retreated into the darkness, her glow dimming to nothing, disappearing so completely it was as if she'd never existed. Marcus sealed the panel just as the footsteps rounded the corner. Captain Williams appeared with two of the collectors. Their environmental suits reflected the harsh corridor lighting, making them look inhuman. One carried a scanning device that pulsed with blue light. "Dr. Reed," Williams said, his tone carefully neutral, "these gentlemen need access to the biological storage units." "Of course," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady, "though I should mention the radiation shielding makes detailed scanning difficult in this sector." One of the collectors spoke, his voice filtered through a modulator. "We're aware of the limitations, we're conducting a visual inspection." Marcus unlocked the main storage area, watching as they moved through the facility with practiced efficiency. They knew what they were looking for. Their scanner passed within meters of where Nira was hiding. The device pulsed, flickered, but the shielding held. "Nothing here," one collector said after 20 agonizing minutes. "The creature is clever," the other replied, "it's learned to hide, but biology has limits. It needs warmth, food, it will make a mistake." They left, Williams following with a troubled expression. Marcus waited until their footsteps faded completely before opening the panel. Nira emerged, shivering, her purple skin dark with cold. Marcus immediately wrapped her in his jacket, pulling her against him. "We can't stay here," he said, already planning. "I need to contact someone who can help." Nira nodded, trusting him completely. As they prepared to move, Marcus's comm device chirped, a message from an old friend, Dr. Bennett, who'd gone independent years ago, operating a research station in uncharted space. The message was brief: "Heard you might need an exit strategy, coordinates attached, come when you're ready." Marcus looked at Nira, at her purple skin now warming back to its normal hue, at her eyes full of trust and something deeper. He had a choice to make, career or conscience, duty or devotion. He pulled Nira closer and kissed her again, this time with certainty. The choice had already been made. The escape plan. Marcus spent the next day preparing while maintaining his normal duties. Every supply he gathered, every route he mapped, brought them closer to freedom or disaster. Dr. Bennett's coordinates pointed to a station 3 days' travel by maintenance pod. It would be tight, dangerous, but possible. "Tonight," he told Nira as they huddled in the cryostorage crawlspace, "we leave tonight." She understood, her purple skin rippled with anxiety and hope in equal measure. She took his hand and guided it to her face, leaning into his palm. The gesture had become their language, touch meant everything words couldn't express. Marcus pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of her body against his. "I'm leaving everything behind," he whispered, "my career, my life here, everything." Nira's eyes filled with something that might have been tears. She pressed her forehead to his, that sacred gesture, and her skin began to glow. Purple light filled the small space, pulsing with the rhythm of their synchronized heartbeats. She pulled back and took his face in her hands, staring at him with such intensity it took his breath away. Then she kissed him, deep and desperate, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. Marcus responded with equal passion, his hands sliding down her back, pulling her into his lap. The purple glow intensified, spreading across her skin in waves. She gasped against his mouth, her fingers tangling in his hair. "I love you," he breathed between kisses, knowing she couldn't understand but needing to say it anyway. Nira seemed to sense the meaning, her skin flared brilliant violet, and she held him tighter, her body trembling not with fear now but with emotion too big to contain. They stayed wrapped in each other until duty forced them apart. At 0200 hours, alarms shrieked through the horizon. Unauthorized access detected, Maintenance Bay 7. Marcus's heart stopped. That wasn't their bay, someone else was making a move. He pulled up the security feed and saw collectors moving through the corridors, dragging someone, a figure with purple skin, unconscious, being loaded into a containment unit. "No," Nira whispered beside him, her first word in his language, broken and anguished. "There are others," Marcus realized, "they found others of your people." Nira's skin went nearly white. She grabbed the tablet and drew frantically, showing him caverns beneath the ship's landing site, places where her people might hide. The collectors had been hunting the entire time. "We move now," Marcus said, while they're distracted. They ran through the service tunnels, Nira's hand locked in his. Behind them, more alarms, more chaos. The collectors were leaving, taking their prize. Bay 3's maintenance pod was small, cramped, designed for short-range repairs. Marcus overrode the launch protocols while Nira sealed herself inside. "Unauthorized launch detected," the ship's computer announced. "Go, go, go," Marcus muttered, slamming the final commands. The pod lurched free just as security reached the bay. Plasma fire scorched the hull, but they were already accelerating away. Inside the tiny pod, pressed together in the pilot's seat, Marcus set the coordinates for Dr. Bennett's station. 3 days, they had 3 days together in this metal coffin. Nira wrapped herself around him, her purple skin glowing softly in the darkness. She was crying, he realized, silent tears for her people, for everything lost. Marcus held her as the stars streaked past, whispering promises he intended to keep. The choice. The pod drifted through uncharted space, systems running on minimal power to avoid detection. Marcus and Nira existed in a bubble of warmth and quiet desperation, knowing pursuit could come at any moment. On the second day, the collector ship appeared on their sensors. "They're tracking us," Marcus said, his hands flying over the controls. Nira pressed against his back, her arms around his waist, her skin pulsing with fear. The pod had no weapons, limited maneuverability, they were prey, and the hunter had found them. The comm crackled to life. "Dr. Reed, return the specimen and you'll face minimal consequences." Marcus's jaw tightened. "She's not a specimen, she's a person. Your career is over, your life as you knew it, gone. For what? An alien creature." Nira's fingers dug into his chest, he could feel her heartbeat racing against his spine. Marcus looked at the controls, at the collector ship closing distance, then he looked at their destination, Dr. Bennett's coordinates, freedom, a new life. He made his choice. His fingers danced across the panel, rerouting power, overloading the pod's shields in a brilliant flash that would blind the collector's sensors for precious minutes. "Hold on," he told Nira. The pod lurched into maximum burn, every system screaming in protest. The collector ship fired, plasma burning through space where they'd been moments before. Nira's arms tightened around him, her face buried against his neck. He could feel her fear, her trust, her love. Dr. Bennett's station appeared ahead, a small outpost clinging to an asteroid. The docking bay doors opened. Come on, Marcus urged the struggling pod. More weapons fire, closer now, the pod's hull temperature spiked. They hit the docking bay at dangerous speed, the pod skidded across the deck, alarms wailing, then Dr. Bennett's shields activated, cutting off the collector ship. Silence. Marcus and Nira sat frozen, hardly daring to breathe, then the pod door opened, and Dr. Bennett's weathered face appeared. Cutting it a bit close, Marcus. They stumbled out, Nira's legs shaking, Marcus caught her, and she turned in his arms, her purple skin cycling through every shade of emotion, relief, joy, love. She kissed him there in the docking bay, not caring who saw, her skin blazed brilliant violet, lighting up the entire space. Dr. Bennett chuckled, I see you brought more than research data. Marcus pulled back just enough to look at Nira, really look at her, her dark eyes shone with tears and happiness, her hands framed his face, thumbs stroking his cheeks. I love you, she whispered in his language, the words careful and new. His heart stopped, you learned. For you, she said simply. Marcus kissed her again, deeper, not caring about the past or the future, only this moment. Well, Dr. Bennett said, welcome to your new life, both of you, the collectors can't reach you here, and I could use a xenobiologist with your skills. Marcus looked around the small station, nothing like the horizon, nothing like the life he'd planned. Nira's hand found his, fingers intertwining. It was perfect. Later, in the quarters Dr. Bennett assigned them, Nira and Marcus lay together, her purple skin glowed softly in the darkness, painting patterns across the ceiling. No regrets, she asked in halting words. Marcus pulled her closer, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, none, you. She smiled and pressed her forehead to his, their sacred gesture, home, she said, you are home. Their hearts beat in sync, two rhythms becoming one. Outside, the stars turned, indifferent to human laws or corporate greed. Inside, a xenobiologist and an alien girl with purple skin began building something new. Something that transcended species and fear. Something like love. Something like freedom. Something entirely their own.